Welcome to the virtual festival, and I hope everyone is doing safe during these unprecedented times. I hope you guys continue on loving each other, keeping each other safe. Happy Pride Month, and let's stay together.
Happy Pride, Indianapolis. It must be a really strange time to be celebrating Pride in many ways, given you can't be together in person, but it's a really cool time to celebrate Pride because of the landmark Supreme Court ruling that just came down. So I hope that you're able to take some comfort in that. And I personally am very energized by all of the activism that's going on. It feels like it's about time, and I feel like it's going to really make a difference and be a turning point in the Black Lives Matter movement and everything else that affects. The dominoes to me are falling. So take courage, enjoy as much as possible safely, take care of yourselves and take care of each other, and live long and prosper.
Hi everyone, my name is Kaylin Jackson. I'm one of the owners and vice chairs at the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm so honored to be with you here today for 2020 Indy Pride Virtual Festival. At the Colts, we strive to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in all that we do within the organization and all that we do within the community. It's a mission that is very important to us every day, but especially right now during these times when racism and injustice is at the forefront of all of our minds. We're so happy to hear that even with all the difficulties with COVID-19, that Indy Pride was able to push forward and put on this amazing festival. And I know I was looking forward to being with everyone in person for it, but I know that it'll still be such a great celebration. And we're so proud to be a part of it. When we heard that you were dedicating 2020 to elevating and celebrating the voices of the Black community and other communities of color, we were even more excited to be a part of this event. It just makes it even more timely and more relevant. The work that you do within our community should be celebrated, and the conversations that you are having day to day and year round are so important. And we know that because of you, that it makes the state of Indiana and the city of Indianapolis a better place to live, work, and raise our kids. So from the Colts, we wish you best wishes for Indy Pride 2020 Virtual Festival, and we really hope to be together next year in 2021.
Hi! Hey, y'all. Welcome back. Did you all enjoy those performances that we had? One from Okara Imani, and then we had another one from Charlie and the Haven Yoga Studios. We hope you check it out and sign up for her classes, because I know I'm more relaxed, more zen, and more... Is that how you feel? That's how I feel. Is that how you feel? Of course, sang those songs. I really loved her last song. Such emotion and such tone quality. It was absolutely fantastic. Great. We thank you so much for coming to be a part of Indy Pride Virtual Celebration 2020. We love you. We appreciate you. And we are just so thankful. I want to give it out to our ASL interpreters that we have on the side of the screen with us. We are thankful that you are here, so that way we can include everyone in this celebration. It's just not only those who are it's for everyone, and we are just thankful for that. And now we want to thank some of our sponsors. We want to thank 1-800-QUIT-NOW. We want to thank Delta Faucet Company. We want to thank Fifth Third. We want to thank Honda Manufacturing of Indiana. We want to thank Luna Language Services. We want to thank Allison Transmissions and Salesforce. We had to pay some bills. They gave us some coins, and that's why we want to thank you and let you know your money has been wellly taken care of.
But I hope you all are having a cocktail today. And if you haven't, guess what?
We're making a cocktail.
Are you all ready for a cocktail? I'm going to be making a cocktail because I don't trust Tia with the whole.
Let me tell you, I'm not a bartender. Pat is a bartender, but I'm a drinker. So I'm gonna drink whatever she makes.
I am one of those. Let's get this correct. I'm gonna make it till it tastes good. Let's say that. I'm gonna make it till it tastes good. That's what we're doing with that. So let us go ahead and get started with this. This time we're sponsored by Tito's Vodka. Tito's Vodka. It's a very smooth distilled vodka.
And hold on, you gotta let them know about Bud Light Seltzer.
Oh, yes.
We're also sponsored by them, and all of our drinks are gonna be made with this all day long.
So we're some queens, so we're gonna make it in some tall glasses. Yeah. So it says add 1.5 ounces of vodka. Oh, that's about right. Maybe. Then we're going to add about 4 ounces of ginger ale.
No, a little more. A little more.
I'm
ginger.
kidding.
Just a little more.
So this is about an 8-ounce can. So we're going to add about half of it. This is the mini can. Yeah. So we're going to add about half of that. And then we're going to add just a splash of grape juice.
Ooh.
But we changed up the recipe just a little bit. We're going to use a little bit of cranberry juice in there. Okay. And it's over ice. We're going to stir this. Tia, here, I'll let you have that one, and I'm going to make myself one.
I'm going to let you know how it tastes, because it sounds wonderful right now.
I mean, I kind of made it a little potent.
Let me tell you. Oh, we forgot to put some Bud Light Seltzer right here.
Don't put that in there.
Why?
Not in there.
They said you got to mix it.
No, chase it. See, this is why she is not allowed behind bars. Because she don't have some of y'all drinking something off. Do not hire.
Okay.
You can hire her to do your show, but do not hire her to run your liquor.
I can't make a drink, but I can drink it.
Don't do it. All right, let's try this. Hold on.
That's actually good. Yeah, it is. And it's not as potent as you think it is.
I am magical behind this here Tito's
bottle. Let me tell y'all, she put 1/2 cup in mine and put
Tito's.
1/4 cup in hers.
Tito's.
So chop it up to Pat trying to get me drunk if I say something wrong.
We do not
here.
If you drink responsibly.
Yeah, we're all at home. So you can drink as much as you want to, long as you stay at home.
And don't forget, you are welcome to, if you want to tip either one of us, you have $Dominican83. It's Tia's Cash app. If you would like to drop her some tips in her virtual tip jar, that would be absolutely amazing. Yes. We thank you so much for being at Virtual Pride 2020. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank the Indy Pride board enough. Larry Stribling, Chris Handberg, Jack Shepler, Robert, Tabitha, Chad, Tiffany. Yes. Oh my God, let me thank Tiffany.
Yes.
Tiffany has been through it, and she is our online marketing person and the one who does all the online stuff. And she has been going with the punches and going with the flows, and every time something changes, so that way we are sensitive to the community and what's happening, she has been on it to change it and fix it. And I want to personally thank you, Tiffany, for just being absolutely amazing. We can't do it. And what you all have done, Indy Pride Board, I want to say you have done so much. And I'm so thankful that you are highlighting the Black lives, the Black voice, the BIPOC voice. We can't thank you enough. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'm so thankful to be back here with you again this year.
Yes. And we want to introduce our next 2 performances. We have the Drag Queens of Indiana Avenue with Stephen Lane.
Stephen Lane.
Oh, it's Stephen Lane.
Stephen Lane.
I'm sorry, Stephen Lane.
That's Stephen Lane. You better say that name.
Stephen Lane and Devon Ginn.
I know your name, Stephen. Don't worry.
A performance by the Palace.
Yes. So we'll see you back here in just a few short minutes. Sorry, we're working out volume here too. So if we're a little loud, it's our fault. We're just excited. We're having a good time over here.
We're having a good time.
We're just having it's Pride. I did. I had to make sure you ate today. I knew we were going to be drinking a little bit.
Drinking, and you did. You made sure we ate. And, just for my Black brothers and sisters and all in between, I wore my good hair.
Oh, yeah.
My good curly ethnic hair.
It was Tia's birthday the other day, so I got to spend all day Friday with Tia. All day Friday with Tia. So
if you didn't give me no birthday gift, you can hit that dollar sign and make it pay.
on the cash app. But we'll see you back here in just a few short minutes when we have the drag queens of Indiana on Indiana Avenue with Stephen Lane and Devon Ginn, and then a performance by the Palace. We'll see you back in a few minutes.
Smooches, we love you. We'll get another hour though.
As human beings, we are all wired for connection, and connection is defined by a deep sense of love and belonging.
Belonging to me means that you never have to hide who you truly are.
Belonging, I would say, is a feeling of being wanted and safe in a community, even if they're full of people that are completely different from you.
Belonging for me is being part of a community like friends, family, or company, and to be who I am and feel free to do what I want.
I think everyone deserves to love who they are and be who they want to be.
Whether you're at work, whether you're at home, or whether you're walking down the street, you should be accepted for who you are.
Everyone deserves to feel like they belong in a community, and Salesforce develops that community for our employees and our friends. No matter who you are, you can find your home here.
Being allies is an important step in creating a larger community, and that larger community is how we stay safe, happy, and how we create that sense of belonging that we all need and crave as humans.
Regardless of who you're in love with, you should be able to celebrate that and be public about it and not be ashamed or have to hide yourself.
I believe everyone should have the right to do what they want, marry who they want, be who they want. And if I can help fight for that, then I definitely want to be an ally.
It's all about support, feeling that you're part of something, and just helping everyone along, and everybody deserves equality.
There's this saying that says the queers and the LGBT folks are like butterflies. When you see them out flitting about, you know the environment is healthy.
Without friends, without family, without community and allyship, none of us would be as successful as we are. So it's important to think about who needs an ally and to show up and to speak up.
We all have a role to play on the path to equality. If we all come together and work together to show up for our LGBTQ community, then that's when we'll start to see real change, and then every person will feel like they belong.
The only point of being here is if we can all be here.
We really need allies and the support of everyone to make sure that the world is an equal place for all.
Every single movement is sparked by someone speaking out, but it gains momentum when allies join the cause. We can never forget the importance of standing with others. That's what's going to take us to equality for all.
Hi, I'm Maria Rose from Cummins. On behalf of Cummins LGBTQ+ employees and allies, we're excited to participate in this year's virtual event for Indy Pride. Now more than ever, it's imperative that we learn how to listen, understand, and appreciate each other for who we are. Thanks, Indy Pride.
My name is Jenny White, and I am the Executive Director of Trinity Haven, Indiana's first residential program for LGBTQ youth who are experiencing homelessness. While we are working very hard to open our doors as soon as we possibly can, we wanted to take this time to celebrate Pride. We know that these are trying times. We recognize the hard work of everyone right now and throughout history who have worked diligently to end discrimination and injustice, and we stand arm in arm with all of you who are trying to make the world a better place. Thank you for your work. Thank you for helping us do our work to make Indiana safe, welcoming, and affirming for everyone. From all of us at Trinity Haven, we recognize and celebrate Pride.
Some of you may or may not know this, but in 1945, a queen established her monarchy where sovereignty was ignored, and her full self destined to be misnamed before she had a name that was never her name. It was a shot glass first. Some say it was a rock. Some say it was a brick. Some say it was a bottle sitting, sip, splash, shatter the reveal. What matters is that people saw. People could recount the moment St. Marcia decided a queen needed space amongst the need for space in a space with no space, a life lived in a vacuum full of suck and fuck and holy flowers hiding in backseats and blacked out bars flowing with watered down sentient libation, blurry and vivid, stone and wall. Glitter and gin flowing down the alleyways and the boulevards that link to the village comprised of a set of systems rooted in white supremacist patriarchal capitalism on Christopher Street. But if we're being honest, Mama would say it's just another Saturday, honey and the swine, ever present and anti-black, cuffing to shackle, knocking to break, snatching, lynched, pearls clutched. When the sun went to sleep, the public moral squad would gather a stacked assortment of pawns and knights on the strip to ensure that the queens can't be checked. St. Marcia can't be checked. She said checkmate when she said justice and power to the people before making it her home. En route to New York from Jersey, an egg cracked on a train to reveal a caterpillar with a dead name carrying burning clothes fit for a funeral, enveloped herself piece by piece in chrysalis spun from marvelous silk, arriving to the Big Apple donning apismatic color warnings fit for a riot, darling. She was a painted lady, a butterfly. Family, Nymphalidae. Genus, Vanessa. Type, bug. Pattern and coloring, hot peaches. Average lifespan in the wild, no data. Which is to say, when a monarch's wings get wet, she is likely to have drowned. Which is to say, we know she was bludgeoned and submerged. Her STAR children identified the body of the butterfly floating against the current of the Hudson River. The painted lady whose wings got wet, Mama Marsha P. Johnson. They pulled her body when I was a baby from the water, and the case is still cold, tight-lipped public servants. It's okay. The streets know the kind that stole Marsha's spirit from her bones. Thank you. So that is speaking specifically about Mama Marsha P. Johnson. Awesome. Thank you. Great. And what's interesting is people see the already whitewashed Stonewall riots as the pivotal moment, but what people don't realize is that queer culture is as old as time. Yes. As old as humans have been around. And I'm curious, before Marsha P. Johnson ignited the gay rights movement, Indiana Avenue had a large queer presence that is relatively unknown, I'm sure you can agree. Yes. But based on your research, how were police raids different in the 1920s and 30s versus the 60s and 70s?
That's a really good question. Definitely when Indiana Avenue was hosting these drag queen events at the jazz clubs, the police would raid the jazz clubs and, really try to put an end to drag queens performing along Indiana Avenue. And these drag queens, it's not anything new to Indiana Avenue or to Indianapolis. They called it female impersonators back then, but the earliest female impersonator show that I found in my research was in the 1880s here in Indianapolis. And it was tied to minstrel shows that came through the city.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. So it was definitely kind of a comedy routine when it was through the minstrel shows. Like they're making fun of women and they're kind of making fun of the opposite sex and the opposite gender. But it was definitely it wasn't considered something that was gay, what gay people did as a profession. It was definitely straight men dressing up in drag and sometimes in blackface. And acting like Aunt Jemima and stuff like that. So
look,
right. So you had the pansy craze taking off in the jazz era, which was in the 1920s. And Indiana Avenue had its very first pansy show in 1933. And that's very pivotal because you see that there's actually an explicit sexual orientation attached to the drag shows with the word pansy in front of it, pansy ball. So pansy, like back in the 1920s, like people were associating a lot of human behavior to flowers for some reason. And pansy comes from the French word to thank. So if you were a man who had a lot of time to sit around and think, you were gay. So you're a pansy.
Well, what does COVID have all these men out here doing now?
Okay.
Lots of time to sit and think.
We all got a lot of time to sit and
Listen.
So when the police figured out that they were having pansy balls in the jazz clubs along Indiana Avenue, and these weren't, dedicated gay spaces at the time, they were very much considered straight spaces.
Okay.
But these gay drag queens, pansies, were able to come in and really do their set and show off all their talent. And they came out of the surrounding community that lived around Indiana Avenue at that time, which is a very Black community.
That's beautiful to hear. And so I work full time at the Madam Walker Legacy Center. And by default, I've had to do so much deep dives into not just Indiana Avenue, but its rich history in jazz, which leads me to my next question. So, of course, Indianapolis has a rich history in jazz that is globally recognized. Like if you type in Indiana Avenue, hashtag Indiana Avenue on Instagram or Twitter, you'll see Japanese kanji characters, you'll see things written in Chinese, you'll see things written in Arabic. It's a global phenomenon that people who are connoisseurs of jazz appreciate the roots in Indianapolis, specifically Indiana Avenue. So how did the early jazz movement, back when it was considered monkey music, jungle music, how did that influence pansy balls and other queer events?
I think that's a really good question because, when jazz was really taking off in Indianapolis and around the country, you see that not everyone is appreciative of the music at that time. It's kind of like how we would consider, the mumble rap now. It's like, it's very much like people talk so much smack about it and just like, oh, that music is just like for ghetto people and ratchet people, And
in the next 70 years, it's going to have like praxis and theory behind it. Right?
Exactly. And that was very much so jazz considered at that time. It was considered, very ratchet, the ratchet music at that time.
Goodness.
So a lot of things were happening along Indiana Avenue and in the city of Indianapolis around that time. So in 1919, Prohibition goes into effect in around the country. And
That's
so
right.
What happens to a lot of these bars and saloons and red light districts, they go underground, but they're being intentionally pushed out of white neighborhoods. And Dr. Paul Mullins did a piece on a red light district on the east side of downtown Indianapolis.
Oh, wow.
And that was very much, catering towards a white clientele.
Yeah.
And so they shut that down and all of it kind of gets pushed along Indiana Avenue and concentrated along there. So you have underground saloons, you have gambling, you have prostitution, you have all those things coming up with the jazz era, which is very like a progressive form of music, which is like, it's all about human expression.
That's right.
It talks about human sexuality. And so in that space of where there's crime, where there's prostitution, alcohol, and it's kind of all underground clandestine, and you have jazz music, this is a space that's being created for queer people to have a visible presence in the public eye, in the public sphere.
How beautiful is that?
It's beautiful.
So, like back in the day, it's like there were safe spaces for us. Police state kept it from being safe, but it is what it is.
Keep that in mind. Yeah.
Okay.
So they was definitely had an eye and an invested interest in stopping these drag queens from existing.
Yeah.
And even there were well-to-do Black members of the community who also didn't want that to happen along Indiana Avenue or in the Black community. But it wasn't so much that it was a religious reasoning. It was because of it was really tied towards our civil rights. They thought
white respectability
politics at play right there. So they were like, if drag queen, if like gay men and trans women in our Black communities are able to have a visible presence, then we're never going to advance in our civil rights and getting ahead in society.
I'm so glad that we're talking about that specifically. Vices are so important, and a gentleman, you cited Kevin Mumford in your paper regarding his work on, or his research on interzones.
Yes.
So interzones where vices like gambling, drug use, sex work, They were a means of living for people who lived in the interzones, having to deal with white supremacist patriarchal capitalism and trying to make a buck when there is absolutely no way. So why were those vices overlooked in favor of the prosecution of queer folks and queer accepting spaces?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, I think, you know, the vices that were then pushed out of white neighborhoods and onto Indiana Avenue, it's not that white people didn't want to still partake in alcohol and prostitution and gambling. They just didn't want it in their neighborhoods. So that's why it was placed in our neighborhoods and Black neighborhoods and in Indianapolis and around the country, really, during this time. But I think that, you know, queerness in that time, and certainly still today, is in direct opposition to whiteness. I think it's a direct challenge to whiteness, where whiteness tells you, you know, the perfect family is white, and it is a two-parent household with a man and a woman, and it has, you know, the 2.5 kids. You got the house with the picket fence. I mean, it's very much entwined in whiteness as owning property and also owning someone through marriage.
People don't realize how alabaster and plaid white supremacy really is. Like, that shit's boring as fuck. Unsubscribe, unpack your BS, please. Pardon my language, content warning for language. Which feeds into my next question. So what role did white supremacy play in upholding the myth of hyperhomophobia in the Black community? Because you always hear Black folk, they the most homophobic, you know, don't bring that gay shit around here. When you realize, like, the false equivalency of Black on Black crime, things happen intraracially. You do the things around the people that you're around the most, and we're typically around people that look like ourselves. So white people are typically around more white people, indigenous people are typically around more indigenous people, so on and so forth. And there's just, based on your research, there's just been like this prevalence of Black people only hate gay, hate queer, hate gender nonconforming, but that's not true. And tell us why.
Definitely not true. And I think that, you know, Black people, especially during the jazz era, had these very progressive notions in terms of, you know, how communities function and how sexuality differs across, you know, I mean, our human sexuality is more of a spectrum. And I think that was really thought of by a lot of Black people, because I think it extends from, you know, a much longer cultural and historical trajectory than what we really realize. I mean, there's one historian that says, you know, trans women were also part of the transatlantic slave trade. They were getting off of those boats, and people thought they were, you know, biologically women because of how they presented themselves, and then they saw that they had, you know, male genitalia. But there were definitely trans women existing and being put into slavery at that time, Black trans women. So I definitely think we had a very progressive handle on the spectrum of sexuality. And that comes through, my biggest source was the Indianapolis Recorder, which has been digitized. And thank goodness it's been digitized, because it made this research possible.
So that's great, because like literally my next question was, how important was the role the Indianapolis Recorder played?
So important. I mean, it's not just that it was digitized, but it was the role that the chief of the, what do you call those?
I know what you're talking about.
Editor-in-chief, yes, and the journalists played, and a lot of the community writers, column writers would play in documenting life along Indiana Avenue. Because that was kind of like, I mean, think about Mass Ave today, but just Black. I mean, that was Indiana Avenue. You had all kinds of stuff happening along that street. That was like the epicenter of Black life in Indianapolis at the time.
Just vibrant.
Yeah, just real vibrant. And they were documenting life, and they released a community poll in 1935 that asked of the community, you know, what is your opinion of pansies or fags? And you would think that the answers would be one way, but it's really a mixed bag in the answers. Like, some people were like, yeah, I think you're, you know, born that way. And some people may pick up the habit later in life, or some people were like, they need to be locked away and thrown in jail, and other people were like, I really appreciate them, and I'm entertained by them. And it's really, it's always been kind of like this mixed bag, and I think all of that negative energy pushed on the pansies at that time was really that respectability politics at play. But the recorder was so instrumental in me being able to do my research. And it says a lot because, you know, that it hasn't been looked at before is because, you know, the history field here in Indianapolis isn't as diverse. So I think they did, our historians, as much as I love the work that they all do, they do great, amazing work. I don't think they realized that the recorder could be used as a way to do queer history of the city of Indianapolis.
It's so interesting that you say that because as I read your paper, I read it like 5 times last night, and he sent me a copy a couple months ago, and I'm just obsessed. What's interesting is how less accepting, historically, not now, but how less accepting the Indianapolis Star was versus the recorder, and how that plays into your research. I'm sure that was interesting.
It was, I wanted to look and kind of compare and contrast, like what was the Star saying? I mean, there wasn't a lot of talk about, you know, homosexuality in the Star in the 30s and 40s. A lot of it, you know, they'll do like a word of the day, and today's word of the day is homosexuality, and how we define it is, you know, it's a disease, and you know, it's not something you want to be a part of.
Whereas back in the day, journalism.
Whereas like the recorder was really kind of took on. I mean, some of it was pseudoscientific, what the recorder would like, but they were more careful in how they talked about it. In one article, they talk about the history of homosexuality, and you know, they track it back to like Romans and, you know, Greeks, and
I'm gonna have to look at your bibliography again because I need to read that. My God!
And they even have a picture of like female impersonators that were performing in Washington D.C. at the time. This was like in the 1930s. So it's really interesting how, you know, both communities looked at queerness, at gayness, and handled it differently.
So, with the recorder being what I'm assuming was the bulk of your research, because such little information was available, what other pieces of research did you use to conduct?
I looked at secondary sources. So Dr. Kevin Mumford's work on interzones was very important. I compared my paper to another historian. Her name was, I'm gonna forget her name, Laura Grantmeyer. And she did her research on female impersonators of the Pittsburgh Hill District, which was another Black area, that Black entertainment district in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she looked at the jazz clubs there that also had female impersonators performing right then and there. And these queens were kind of accessing different venues across the country. So they would take what they call the Chitlin Circuit, which was like a network of, you know, Black communities that also had jazz entertainment districts, where jazz performers certainly could definitely tap into the Chitlin Circuit to find work elsewhere and go on tour and things like that. Those drag queens were using the same network to go on tour and travel the whole entire country to perform.
How brilliant was that? And it's interesting to see that, you know, Marsha being born in the 40s, Mama Marsha P. Johnson, how much of the 20s and 30s influenced her and the revolution that came soon after.
Yes.
I was about to ask one question, but I think I'm going to save that for last because it's a little fun.
Okay.
But could you paint a picture of what a day in the life was like for a 1920s or 30s drag performer? Where did they shop? What did they do when they weren't on stage? What restaurants did they frequent? Where were they accepted?
Now, talking about their daily life is a little difficult right now, but I saw one column writer, he wrote in the Recorder, Indianapolis Recorder in the 30s, he was like, so-and-so drag queen needs to give their dress back to Miss Mabel in Hallville. You're not going to keep her dress. So, you know.
Oh my goodness. I love it.
So it was kind of, I feel like it was a community supported effort, like where you could go to, you know, Mrs. Mabel in Hallville and borrow a dress for your set coming up in the jazz club.
Miss Mabel need that dress back.
She gonna need it back, and she's gonna contact the Recorder to let you know to return that dress.
After all that money you made on stage, you're gonna give me my dress back.
I need that dress. You go buy a dress now. You buy your own. So the recorder, they were definitely a part of the community, and in a lot of ways were accepted and celebrated because the first Pansy show, which happened in 1933, happened at Raymond D's Paradise Garden. It is no longer there anymore. A lot of the buildings along Indiana Avenue that served the jazz clientele are gone. But he was instrumental in hosting the very first one, and and it was reported to attract 2,000 people inside the venue, and then a line of 1,000 people waiting outside in 1933. They had
clout.
Yeah,
so they had some clout.
People were really interested. They lined up to see it. Like they were like, we have got to see this for ourselves. I mean, and the queens, they were actually singing, so they weren't lip syncing.
Okay.
They were singing the jazz songs on a stage.
Wow.
And they were supported with the jazz ensemble bands.
What?
Yeah.
So there's a stark difference right there from today's drag queens versus the vintage drag queens. So I've got two questions. The first one is, what was the song or songs of choice for vintage drag, especially since they sang them themselves?
It would have been like all the popular titles of the day. So Stormy Weather would have been one.
With Mama Lena Horne.
Yeah, and they would take on names like Lena Horne and, the drag queens of the 60s along Indiana Avenue. One was called Nina Simone. And, it was, so they were taking on or what was another one? Mae West was another. I can't. So they were taking on the names of celebrities and other jazz performers as their own stage names. And they were trying to really mimic the voice and the look. Really.
Wow. So I forgot the gentleman's name, but you cited an article in the Star that spoke about a Caucasian drag performer, a female impersonator. Yes. And I'm curious because there's this hyper masculinity aspect to it that I heard, where he had to show off how masculine he was by assaulting people who would come on to him, particularly queer men who would come on to him. And it just makes me wonder, if these folks were around today, how would they identify? Right. Is there any evidence that proves this person was a drag performer, but if they were born in 1989, today they'd be considered gender nonconforming or trans? What does that look like?
Right. I think a lot of them, well, definitely with the calling your event Pansy Ball, is definitely putting on the gay sexual orientation on the performers. So they're obviously taking on that identity, whether they identify as gay or not. Pansy Ball is very, gay, sexually explicit in its delivery. But there is definitely evidence that some of these performers were Black trans women. One that comes to mind, her name is Doris Duchess White, and Doris was very much involved, and she was a nationally known drag queen that came up in the 40s.
Wow.
In 1940. So she was everywhere. She was traveling the Chitlin circuit. She had shows in Ohio, and then she went up to Chicago and worked with a jazz performer up there, Frankie Half Pint Jackson, who was also another queer performer.
Yeah,
now, Frankie,
sitting at 5'2".
At little 5'2", little Frankie, he would come on and he would, perform. And he came to Indiana Avenue too, and performed a lot of jazz duets himself. So he would kind of throw his voice into a falsetto and then do the female part and sometimes the male part at the same time.
So he was on his Robin Thicke.
Oh yeah, and he has this really awesome song that you can find if look it up on YouTube or iTunes or wherever you get your music. I think it's called "My Daddy Rocks Me."
Stop.
And that is it's such a good song, and it's not his original song, but he changes the words around, and he's definitely talking about a male lover that calls daddy, and then there's what is considered by a lot of historians the first recorded orgasm on a recording, or kind of like a mimicking
Yeah.
orgasm on a recording, was Frankie
Oh my
Half-Pint
goodness.
Jackson. Yeah,
Frankie Half-Pint was a pioneer.
exactly. And that's just
Frankie ran so Marsha Ambrosius could run. Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, I did that wrong. Frankie Half-Pint Johnson walked so Mama Marsha Ambrosius could run. I love that. It's so interesting to look at the past and how it was the pedestal for the re-envisioning of the future.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful to be a queer, gender non-conforming human, and to just read and do the deep dive into the history, because there's so much, like you spoke about earlier, there's so many respectability politics at play that kept somebody who might have identified as trans or gender nonconforming from living their true life, from being their true selves. And that level of assimilation that was prominent back then, it still exists today. We can't deny that or ignore that. But there is a certain level of freedom, and you have to have access to privilege in order to experience that freedom. So I'm curious, if you were a patron on Indiana Avenue, which spot would you hit up? Like, what's the poppin' spot back then?
I honestly feel like if you wanted your jazz club to shine and like really do well, you were gonna have drag performers there. It seemed like, you know, the Cotton Club had drag performers. Paradise Gardens had drag performers. There was another one called the Log Cabin Supper Club, or something like that, lodge, or they had drag performers. The Madam Walker Theater had drag performers that was for like an annual benefit for the Indianapolis Recorder. They would have like a lineup of jazz musicians, or shake dancers, and drag queen performers. You know,
they were like, we need to make this money. This is a fundraiser. If you are entertained by this, come and give us your money. I love that.
Yeah,
it just goes to show, like, queer culture has always had power with, as far as economic is concerned. People love the allure. People love the not knowing, which is problematic AF. But there's money there. There's always historically has been money there. So it's just so interesting to know that the Recorder used that as a means to raise money, juxtaposed with jazz performers and other ensembles. This is just it's so beautiful, and it affirms my Blackness, and it affirms my queerness, and it tells me that I can be both and at the same time.
Absolutely.
My goodness.
And that's really what got me into doing this research, is because I wanted to see in what ways, because I never saw it before, you know, in what ways Black gay men contributed to the history of Indianapolis and to our society, and in what way, and then coming to find out that Black trans women were also instrumental in contributing to, you know, the health and wellness of Indiana Avenue as a Black entertainment district. You know, like that's something that was really eye-opening to me, and just really exciting to do deep dive into that research.
How long was your research?
Oh my gosh, like I started, probably it was like a 2-year process, but I was in graduate school at the time, so I was taking other classes and working, and you know, I was just, you know, thinking of different topics to come up with, and I knew I wanted it to be gay history related, and I remember sitting in one of my public history classes, and my professor brought up the fact that there were gay clubs along Indiana Avenue. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah,
I never
spill that tea,
that before. So, you know, I was like, let me just do a little investigating. And then, oh my God, what came out? And there's still more research to be done. I mean, especially on the drag kings of Indiana Avenue. There's all that research that needs to happen as well. There were definitely drag king performers along Indiana Avenue as well.
So I know this paper was specifically academic, and the purpose of it was, you know, to graduate, right? Outside of just you wanting to expose this wonderful history. But this history is so rich, and it seems like you are a pioneer in the context of what you're researching and the means in which you're using to research it. So I'm curious, what's next? Are you doing drag kings? Is there another facet of queer Black culture you're going to dive into?
Right. I mean, I would definitely love to continue this research, especially figure out, what happened to the drag queens after the Black drag queens after Indiana Avenue ceased to exist as kind of like this Black entertainment district in the 1970s.
Yep.
I want to know what happened to them afterwards. Like, were they able to transition into the white gay venues? Did they have to resort to other means of making money?
Wow.
I would really love to know what happened next. And
because that's a huge gap.
Absolutely.
I came of age when here in Indianapolis the 10 was popping and a thing.
Yeah.
When Talbot Street was a thing.
Yeah.
And those beautiful venues that are no more, it makes me wonder, what story will they tell? How will that history be painted, and through which lens will it be painted?
Absolutely.
I'm so excited.
So important. So I work for the Indianapolis Public Library now. I'm a special collections librarian, so I collect the history of Indianapolis. That's my job, which I love it. I love it. I'm glad I'm out of grad school, but
I know that's right.
I love the work that I did on this paper, but I love my job too. So I recently got funding to do an LGBTQ plus oral history project. So if anyone knows of any of these drag queens that performed along Indiana Avenue from the 70s, or earlier or later, please reach out, because this is a continuing research that definitely needs to keep going.
What this shows me is that queer Black history is not new or unique, and for that reason it should be celebrated. I think the future, I know the future is Black, it is gender nonconforming, and it takes people like you to tell that story.
Oh, thank you.
So,
I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Stephen. We are here at the Garfield Park Arts Center. Shout out to the staff here for letting us have space to tell these stories. Shout out to the 2 dope artists back here. We've got Box, the artist, and Tania. Hit them up. I'm sure they're open for commissions. But I'm just grateful to share virtual space with you all and to share physical space with you. I have quarantined, so I am not contagious. I have nothing. And I got my mask on deck, and I'm sure the same goes for Stephen. Thank you all so much, and have a good one.
Yes, happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
I was born by the river in a little tent, and just like I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. It's been too hard to living, but I'm afraid to die. 'Cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but I know the change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. I go to the movies, yes I go downtown. Somebody keeps telling me don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother And I'll say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. And oh, there's been days that I thought I couldn't last for long. Now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but no, a change gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. What's up, y'all?
Yeah. That's what we're doing.
Tie me right up, baby. Tie me down. We're undercover lovers. Don't let it out. Be still the world, it fades away from what we're doing. Orgasmic rainbow shade. Nothing left to say. You told your best friend, she said, it's all the same. Everybody's got their silly little game. But still the world it fades away from what we're doing. Orgasmic rainbow shade. I'm here to say I am here to say, I'll take you everywhere. You're under my skin. I tried to lock you out, but I locked you in. And still the world it fades away from what we're doing. Yeah, yeah. Orgasmic rainbow shade. You gone away. was fun.
Oh, wow. There you go. Woo!
I'm hot, but I ain't taking these clothes off. Make me take it off. Make me! Little girl, don't you rise. Little boy, don't you fall. I've got a story to tell, and it's about what's your mind. What a gentleman called him was telling this line about yesterday. Woo, just let it ride. Won't you listen to our song? Oh, baby, please don't ever come from us. Pick up your bag, mama. I'm your coat, daddy. I'm gonna call the Cadillac Tippy Daddy before I'm Larry. I'm flying up my God. It's just about yesterday. Oh, baby, I don't want it no more. Don't you listen to my song. Oh, baby, please don't. Listen, the sirens are blaring outside of my door. No, baby, I don't want it no more. Don't you listen to my song. Oh, baby, wait. Abnormally numb, oddly hopeful, guilty for feeling this way. Spring has begun, winter's over. Ooh. Wondering why I should feel okay. It's because of the likes of you, my darling. I was so serious, you became curious. We made it through. Oh my, that I could fall out of love that way with a friend like you. Oh, you see, I was the fool. You were the chosen. No, I had no answers. You knew the questions. So summer stepped out. Fall became frozen. I tried to fix you. The truth is I'm broken. It's because of the likes of you, my joy. I became mysterious. You were furious. We fell through. No, I that I could contain his love for myself, of a friend like you. Tomorrow has come. Yesterday over. Whatever our path holds, we'll discover. No, the sun will wait. Rain can bring laughter. There's no shame in the death. Always happily ever after. It's because of the light of you. The sweet, sweet you. We are much stronger and much wiser than we do. Always be true. Love, love, with a friend like you. Oh my. Ooh, tear gas cocktails. Oh.
Hey, do you think